A single pin on a map of Northern California just started blinking. For the first time in a century, the ground beneath one of America's forgotten volcanoes is moving in ways that make geologists go quiet. If it is a real awakening, the towns and cities nearby are facing a category of disaster they have not prepared for. Not a fire, not a flood, not an earthquake. Something else entirely. Right now, thousands of people live and work within sight of a mountain that looks peaceful, beautiful, postcard perfect. They camp in its forests and drive on its roads, protected by a national park. But that mountain is a geological illusion. It is one of the largest plug-dome volcanoes on Earth, a 10,457-foot cork jammed into the throat of an active magma system. And for the last few years, the system has been making noise. The internet is already panicking. Rumors are flying. Headlines are claiming the beast has woken up. So, the real question is, did Lassen Peak just give a warning? Or are we just learning to listen to a conversation that the planet has been having with itself all along? The alert was not real. Let's be clear about that. The headlines you may have seen, the anxious social media posts, the rumors of an imminent eruption in Northern California, they were based on a misunderstanding, a dangerous one. On May 11, 2023, a magnitude 5.5 earthquake violently shook the area around Lake Almanor, about 20 miles southeast of Lassen Peak. The calls flooded in. People were scared. Was the volcano waking up? The United States Geological Survey was forced to issue a statement explaining that the quake was tectonic, a product of the Basin and Range province stretching and cracking, a completely separate geological engine from the volcano. It was not magma moving. It was the crust of the Earth doing what it always does. Then, just over a year later, on June 24, 2024, another tremor. This time, it was different. A swarm of tiny earthquakes, too small for anyone to feel, rattled directly beneath the Lassen Volcanic Center. This time, the fear was more specific. It was in the right place. And again, the Yuskis had to step in. They called it background business as usual, a reminder that volcanoes can shake, rattle, and roll even when they're not erupting. It was the system letting off a little steam. It was not an eruption. Not yet, but the panic revealed a deeper truth. We had forgotten what Lassen Peak is, what it did, and what it will inevitably do again. To understand the fear, you have to go back to a time when there were no sensors, no live data streams, no public relations teams to quell the panic, a time when the mountain spoke for itself. Before 1914, Lassen Peak was just a mountain. The southernmost active volcano in the Cascade Range, sure, but it had been silent for as long as anyone could remember. The last major event was the very formation of the dome itself, a rapid geological surge some 27,002 years ago, built on the ruins of a much larger, older volcano that had collapsed. In the early 20th century, it was just a landmark, a backdrop for the loggers, ranchers, and businessmen carving out a life in the rugged corners of Northern California. It was quiet, stable, permanent. Then, on May 30th, 1914, the mountain coughed. It was a phreatic explosion, a steam blast. Without warning, a new crater, 40 feet wide, blew open near the summit. Pressurized groundwater, superheated by magma deep below, had finally found a weak point in the rock and burst through. It wasn't lava, it wasn't ash, it was a viciously hot jet of steam and rock fragments. It was modest, a geological hiccup, but it was a start. Over the next 12 months, the mountain continued to breathe. More than 150 explosions were recorded. Some were small, barely noticeable plumes of steam. Others were violent enough to hurl boulders across the summit. The new crater grew with each blast, widening, deepening, hollowing out the peak from the inside. The mountain was clearing its throat, and one man decided he had to get a closer look. Benjamin Franklin Loomis was not a scientist. He was a local businessman, a homesteader, and an amateur photographer from the nearby town of Anderson. When Lassen Peak started erupting, he saw it not as a threat, but as history. An opportunity that could not be wasted. So he did something that seems, even today, almost incomprehensible. He ran toward the danger. He hauled his heavy, fragile camera equipment, we're talking large format cameras and delicate glass plate negatives, up the shaking slopes of an active volcano, multiple times. The technology of 1914 was not built for adventure photography. Each shot was a labor of intense physical effort and technical precision. Setting up a tripod on unstable, ash-covered ground, calculating exposure in the strange, shifting light of a steam-filled sky, handling glass plates that could be ruined by a single drop of moisture or a sudden jolt. Loomis did this while standing on a mountain that was actively trying to tear itself apart from within. He later wrote, "I realized that if the mountain should blow off while I was looking into the crater, I would not be here to tell the tale. But for all that, I never experienced the feeling of fear, for I was there to take pictures, and the pictures were the principal object of my thought." It was an act of profound, almost reckless, dedication. His photographs are not just historical artifacts. They are crucial pieces of scientific data. They show the evolution of the crater, the sequence of the blasts, the nature of the ejecta. A century later, geologists studying his images would be able to reconstruct the eruption with a clarity that would have been impossible otherwise. They could prove theories and debunk misconceptions, all because a man with a camera decided to risk everything for the perfect shot. He was documenting a geological spectacle. He didn't know he was also creating a forensic record. In mid-May of 1915, after a year of huffing steam, the nature of the eruption changed. The deep heat source finally breached the surface. Molten lava, a thick, viscous dacite magma, began to ooze into the summit crater. It was too thick and sticky to flow like a classic lava stream. Instead, it pushed upwards like hardened toothpaste being squeezed from a tube. It was building a dome, a plug of solid rock, right in the volcano's throat, and as it grew, it trapped the immense pressure of the volcanic gases still rising from below. The mountain was now a loaded gun. The first shot was fired on the night of May 19, 1915. The growing lava dome became unstable. A section of its hot, incandescent rock broke loose, avalanching down the mountain's steep western flank. On its own, this would have been a minor event. But it wasn't just rock. It was spring in the Cascades, and the slopes of Lassen Peak were buried under a deep, heavy snowpack, up to 30 feet in some places. When that glowing hot rock hit the snow, the reaction was instantaneous and catastrophic. The snow didn't just melt, it vaporized. The immense heat transfer created a violent explosion of water, steam, and rock that fluidized the entire mountainside. What came next was a lahar, a volcanic mudflow. This wasn't a slow-moving ooze. It was a churning, boiling tsunami of mud, ash, melted snow, and boulders the size of houses, roaring down the mountain's drainage channels. It surged more than 11 miles down Lost Creek, scouring the landscape down to the bedrock. It ripped mature forests out by their roots, snapping thousand-year-old trees like twigs and carrying them along in the torrent. The sound would have been a deafening roar, a combination of a flood, an avalanche, and a freight train. Within hours, a pristine alpine valley was transformed into a wasteland of gray, steaming mud, and shattered timber. This was the birth of what is now called the devastated area, a scar on the land so profound that you can still walk through it today, 110 years later, and feel the violence of that single night. Loomis was there to photograph the aftermath. His images show a world erased. It should have been the climax. It was only the prelude. The avalanche on May 19th had done more than trigger a lahar. It had removed a piece of the dome, like taking a cap off a shaken bottle of soda. The pressure inside the mountain was now critically unbalanced. 3 days later, on the afternoon of May 22, 1915, Lassen Peak exploded. This was the main event, the climactic, Plinian eruption that would etch Lassen into the history books. With a terrifying roar, a column of ash, gas, and pulverized rock shot into the sky, reaching an altitude of 30,000 feet. It was a scene from Dante's Inferno, a churning gray pillar connecting the earth to the heavens. The collapsing ash cloud generated pyroclastic flows, glowing hot, fast-moving avalanches of gas and volcanic debris that are fundamentally unsurvivable. They raced down the volcano's northeast flank at speeds over 100 miles per hour, incinerating everything in their path, extending the devastated area even further. The ash column was so vast that it blocked out the sun, plunging the surrounding landscape into darkness. Fine volcanic ash traveled eastward on the wind, falling like a strange, gritty snow on towns 200, 250, even 280 miles away. Residents in Elko, Nevada, woke up to a thin layer of gray dust coating their streets, having no idea it was the remains of a mountain in California. For a moment, Lassen Peak was the most violent place on the continent. That blast was the peak. The eruption wasn't over, not by a long shot. Minor steam explosions and ash ejections would continue sporadically until 1917, a long, slow exhale after the main convulsion. But the world had seen enough. Benjamin Loomis's stark, terrifying photographs had circulated across the country. They were a sensation. They showed a power of nature that most Americans, tucked away in their cities and towns, could barely comprehend. The images were so powerful, and the story so compelling, that they directly influenced a major political act. On August 9, 1916, less than 15 months after the Great Explosion, President Woodrow Wilson signed the act creating Lassen Volcanic National Park. It was an act of preservation, born directly from an act of destruction. The purpose was to protect the devastated landscape for study and for wonder, to ensure that future generations could see the evidence of what a volcano could do. For the next 63 years, until Mount St. Helens blew its top in 1980, Lassen Peak held a unique distinction. It was the only volcano in the contiguous United States to have erupted in the 20th century, a lonely king on a quiet throne. And then, we forgot. California is earthquake country. Everyone knows this. The San Andreas Fault is a cultural icon, a geological celebrity. Millions of people live with the daily, low-grade hum of seismic anxiety. They have earthquake kits, foundation retrofits, and municipal response plans. But California is also volcano country, and that is the part of the story most of its residents have quietly edited out. John Parrish, a former state geologist of California, put it best. Our nearly forgotten hazard is our volcanoes. Lassen Peak is not a historical monument. It is an active volcanic system. The USESCAS, the federal agency tasked with monitoring it, doesn't mince words. They rank the Lassen Volcanic Center with a very high threat potential. That's the same category as Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier. It's not an academic exercise. That ranking is based on two cold, hard facts: the volcano's explosive potential and its proximity to people. An eruption today would not happen in an empty wilderness. It would happen in a region crisscrossed by highways, populated by towns, and overflown by thousands of commercial airliners every single day. The ash that fell on Elko, Nevada in 1915 would today drift directly into major flight paths connecting the West Coast to the rest of the world, posing a catastrophic threat to jet engines. The Park Service, established in 1916 to protect the volcano's work, now finds itself in a strange position. It is managing a public space that is also a potential disaster area, and the threats are compounding. In the summer of 2021, a new kind of fire came to Lassen. The Dixie Fire, the largest single-source wildfire in California's history, burned a devastating path through the park. It scorched 73,240 acres, 69% of the entire national park. Gone. The fire's cruelest irony was what it did to the volcano watchers. The flames were so intense, they melted the above-ground components of the USG's seismic monitoring stations, the solar panels, the antennas, the data transmission equipment. The very tools designed to give us a warning about the Earth's internal fire were consumed by an external one. In a remarkable testament to engineering, the sensitive seismometers buried deep underground survived the inferno. They kept listening, silently recording the mountain's heartbeat, while the world above them burned. But for a time, scientists were deaf. They had to physically trek into the burned-out landscape to manually retrieve the data, a 21st-century problem solved with a 19th-century solution. It was a stark reminder that our high-tech surveillance of nature is every bit as fragile as the nature we seek to control. So where does that leave us now, in the summer of 2026? The alert level for the Lassen Volcanic Center is normal. The aviation color code is green. The USGS is confident that there is no impending eruption. The recent earthquakes, both the tectonic rumbling at Lake Almanor and the tiny volcanic swarm beneath the peak, are not signs of rising magma. They are just the normal creaks and groans of a complex, living geological system. But normal for a volcano is not the same as normal for a city, or a highway, or a human lifespan. The machine is still active. The magma chamber that fed the 1915 eruption is still there, deep beneath the surface, slowly recharging. The hydrothermal system that powered the first steam blasts in 1914 is very much alive, fueling the park's famous boiling mud pots and steaming fumaroles. They are not just tourist attractions. They are the exhaust vents of a massive subterranean engine. The science of forecasting has improved light years since B.F. Loomis lugged his glass plates up the mountain. Today, a network of GPS receivers tracks ground deformation to within a millimeter, looking for the telltale swelling that signals rising magma. Gas sensors sniff the air for changes in sulfur dioxide emissions. A web of seismometers listens for the unique spectral signature of rock-breaking tremors that indicate magma on the move. We would have a warning. Days, weeks, maybe even months. But a warning is not a solution. The lahar that destroyed Lost Creek in 1915 happened in a matter of hours. A modern-day lahar, triggered by a similar event, would race down drainages that are now populated, that have roads, bridges, and communities. The pyroclastic flows that incinerated the devastated area would do the same to whatever stood in their path. The warning gives you time to run. It does not give you time to move a town. The story of Lassen Peak is not about a sudden, unexpected threat. It is about a permanent one that we choose to periodically forget. The recent seismic jitters didn't change the volcano. They changed our perception of it. They forced a region that thinks mostly about droughts and earthquakes to remember the third, quietest threat, the one that sleeps for a century at a time. The 1915 eruption was not an anomaly. It was a routine. Geological history shows these events happen every few centuries. The clock is always resetting. Benjamin Loomis's stunning photographs gave us a window into the past. The USGS modern sensors give us a window into the present. But neither can truly show us the future. They can only show us the process. The slow, relentless grinding of tectonic plates, the patient accumulation of pressure, the inevitable release. The alert level is green today. The mountain is quiet. But the system that produced one of the most violent eruptions of the 20th century is still fully intact. The fire is still down there.